Allsopp's book, collected writings roughly relating to FC United of Manchester. As you can see, I'm Scott Taylor. I've been doing a soul show, Hidden Gems, on FCUM radio for over 10 years now, one of the Malcolm's volunteers. But that isn't the reason why I'm on here. It's simply because I invested in a pro account with Zoom at the start of lockdown. So it was just to keep in touch with friends and drinks. So that's why they've asked me to host it. So don't expect anything professional, as you've seen already. A few things to point out. Lynette and Andy are being the virtual monitors in the corridors in case anybody wants to try and join in the fun, like James Milner, and maybe offer his opinions that aren't overly welcome. And we will, where are we up to? Yeah, so they can also expel anybody. Jonathan's going to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes about the book, which he's already donated over £6,000 to the club. He has, as you may have read, another 150 copies have been delivered. Lynette's put up the details where you can order a copy if you haven't got one already. And we'll be taking questions at the end of it. So once Jonathan's finished these 10 or 15 minutes, you've got a chance to ask questions from him. So I'll hand over to Jonathan. Maybe you can just give us a little introduction and a bit of background on yourself, and then tell us a bit about the book, Jonathan.
Yeah, sure. Cheers, Scott. Yeah, first of all, our internet's been dodgy all week, but it's been okay today. So we'd like fingers and toes crossed to this end that this holds out. This evening we've literally switched everything off. I think all devices off. We just got the laptop on at the moment. Don't want to become like that. So I think there was a beginning of lockdown, wasn't there a darts tournament or something on where one of the players couldn't participate because his Wi-Fi was not strong enough or something. There's something like that. So I don't want to end up like that dart player tonight. But yeah. So firstly, a bit about me, because I'm just conscious of the fact that a lot of you won't know me, won't have met me before. I'm probably one of the least sociable FC United fans around. For the last, what is it now? Since 2016, for the last 4 years, I've been volunteering as part of the communications team, doing a couple of roles really. I mean, one of them's the board reporter role, which probably a few of you will be familiar with, i.e. producing a report of each month's board meeting. Which was part of the, when the new board was elected in 2016, was part of their commitment to greater, openness and transparency, was to have this report that came out a few days after each board meeting, that would document decisions and discussions at each meeting. And that, that's a lot of hard work, to be honest, but it's something that I've really enjoyed over the last 4 years. And the other is sort of role as what's referred to as a feature writer or producer, like think pieces or thought pieces, which I'm never quite sure exactly what that means. But yeah, I mean, I think there was a point like during 2017, I think, when I sort of dreaded phone calls or emails from the likes of Adrian Seddon and Tim Worrell, because it always turned out to be someone leaving the club. I think we went through that phase, didn't we, where Carl Marginson left, and then I think Damien left like shortly afterwards, and it was always to say, like, look, we need to put something up on the website like in the next few hours to say, like, thanks to Carl and thanks to Damien and that kind of thing. So yeah, so she's never the easiest bit of writing to do. I think, to be honest, I'm one of those people that's one of those volunteers that at the club that's benefited really from that call to arms that was made in that summer of 2016. I think for people to get involved in the running of the club. I mean, at the end of the day, there's more than 2,000 of us. We all have our own, we all have our own skills. We all have our own experience in certain things, and we've all got something to offer. I think mine happens to be just scribbling things down on bits of paper. But yeah, I certainly feel like I've benefited from from that. You know, I mean, we've got, you know, it's not just the match day stuff, is it? We've got volunteers doing stuff right across the club. A lot of it, you know, a lot of it invisible, like a lot of the comms team stuff. I mean, there's dozens of people, you know, working for the comms team. You've got like things like the stakeholder relations committee, commercial committee. You know, the structural review was done by like three volunteers who put a hell of a lot of work into that, you know, for all for nothing. And so, you know, all for no cost. And then you've got people volunteering on, you know, on the finance side. You know, I mean, it's incredible, really, the number of people that we've got involved now in the running of the club. And, you know, this is just, you know, the board reporter role is just one of those roles. Ironically, it's a role that I haven't really got any qualifications or direct experience for. Having said all that, I mean, my day job is as a qualified, I'm a qualified accountant, worked in the NHS now for nearly 30 years as an accountant, as a one of the I think much maligned you know, pen pushers, bean counters, grey suits, you know, call us what you want. And I see just this afternoon, actually, Daniel Hancock has been having another pop at us, I think, in terms of, you know, another reference to the management overheads of the NHS and how there needs to be, you know, a review of red tape and bureaucracy, you know, that's holding clinicians back. So yeah, I mean, I am one of those. I'm one of those suits and one of those pen pushers. So feel free to chuck some virtual rotten tomatoes my way later on. I mean, in terms of my on the football side, I mean, in terms of my top red credentials, as it were, I mean, I'm a founder member of FC United. My first match was the league match against Leek in August 2005, and before that I was a United supporter and season ticket holder since my first match was in 1977. United beating Newcastle 3-1, which was kind of like a birthday present for me at the time, my first trip to Old Trafford. And one of the things that's come out of this book is that one of the chapters in the book refers to my first visit to Old Trafford in '77. And I wrote the piece on my blog it's 7 years ago now, thinking back in 2013. And I remember at the time, like, looking on the internet for anything really about this match, you know, because you forget that, like, you know, there was just very little, you know, how little coverage there was of football then compared to what, you know, the blanket coverage that you've got now. And I just found hardly anything. I think the only thing I found was there was a photo from a newspaper of one of, I think it's the third goal that Jimmy Greenough scored that day. It was a diving header. And that was the only picture I could find, or the only, you know, I couldn't even find any match reports. And then, anyway, so we did this book and sent it out, and then a few people, including Scott, came back to me. Obviously, when they'd read that chapter and said, "Look, you know, this match you're on about has just been on telly a few weeks before, at the beginning of July, I think, on a thing that ITV have been doing, where they've been showing some of the old." I think it's some of the old big match footage from a Sunday afternoon highlights program that they used to do. I think it was a very young Brian Moore on there presenting it all. And yeah, there was actually from a program that was screened in the first week of July, there was actually 10 minutes of footage of United versus Newcastle from February '77. So it was great to see that, even though I think in the piece that I'd written, as an 8-year-old, it felt kind of overwhelming almost to me to be in a football ground with 52,000 people making a right racket, and, you know, the noise of the Stretford end and everything. But then watching the highlights back, it just felt a little quieter than perhaps I'd remember it, which was quite interesting. And in terms of my United supporter, I probably should point out that, yeah, I'm an out of town supporter. I have been virtually the whole time until I moved to Manchester in January. So I've done like almost like 42 years of following teams in red from Manchester, from far afield. So yeah, so I'm one of those much maligned glory hunting bandwagon jumping United supporters. I mean, I've travelled, you know, during the last sort of like 20, 30 years, I've lived in various places. I think perhaps the furthest afield, well, just lived for the last 12 years in London, but before that I was in, back in the early 90s, lived in Cambridge for a few years and regularly travelled up to matches with the East Anglian supporters branch at the time. And I sort of remember those years like really fondly, to be honest, because I was like in my early 20s, and I think that's a good time to be watching football, to be honest. And also it was a time when United, you know, finally, you know, began to turn things around and actually started winning trophies, and then of course eventually won the league in '93. And I think the years of '93 and '94 are perhaps my favourite time of watching Manchester United. I think, you know, that first league title in '93 was just fantastic. You know, and the matches in the last couple of months that led up to that, just unbelievable time really. And then the '94 side with Roy Keane, I think, added to that midfield. And yeah, I mean, I think to me that's the finest football side. You know, I think it was the side that 11 that I think they played 25 matches together and were never beaten, were they? With, you know, with Cantona, Keane, Hughes, you know, as a Schmeichel as the spine of the team. So yeah, so that's sort of my favourite time. I mean, you know, there's a lot. I mean, the treble season was obviously amazing, but like there was just something, I think, that I remember going to the final match of the '93 season at that final match at Wimbledon, and having been to and I'd only missed 2 league games that season, and having been to almost every game, then not being able to get a ticket for that match, and then having to scrabble around in the last 5 minutes before the match to buy one off at Southampton. It just felt, you know, around Sellers Park that day, it just felt like something had changed, and there was a lot of people there, I think, that just, you know, that at that point obviously we'd won the league, and I don't know, it just felt like things were never quite the same after that for me, in terms of watching United. And it was literally like a week after we'd won the league, wasn't it, or so. So yeah. So and it was around that time that I also started writing reasonably regularly about football. I started occasionally contributing to United We Stand around that time. I mean, the fanzines for me were just, you know, it's a cliche, but there were a breath of fresh air around the time, you know, from '89 through the early '90s, just reading Red Issue, Red News, United We Stand. Just loved it, all of them. You know, and some of the stuff by the likes of, you know, Rob Brady and Tumo was in United We Stand was amongst sort of my favourite stuff, really. And I think it was that, reading that sort of stuff, that first got me to like start putting pen to paper and start writing stuff, but stuff that was never as good as that stuff. But it got me going anyway. And it was much later, really, when I eventually like started writing more regularly about football on a blog that I set up in 2012, which became a sort of portal for stuff that I started writing about FC United and also about the NHS and its finances, and there's various sort of political, you know, a lot of it had kind of quite a political bent to it as well. And it's taken me, the 8 years that I've done a blogging have kind of taken me down some interesting avenues, I think, of which this book is one. But you know, I've kind of ended up writing a couple of articles for The Guardian about NHS financial matters, which I never thought I would end up doing. And actually, they asked me to become they were doing a series in 2016 called This is the NHS, and they were inviting people to write kind of secret diaries about what their role was, and they invited me to be the secret finance manager to write a diary about a typical working week. So I got involved in that, and yeah, I've been other things like that for the likes of the Open Democracy website as well. So yeah, and then of course there's a lot of FC United related stuff on there. I mean, when I looked back before when I started doing this book, there was actually 80 articles on there that were FC United related. I mean, I think it amounts to like about 140,000 words in total. And they you know, it's quite interesting because they kind of like document sort of like what I'd say were probably like 3 phases in our history. You know, we had the sort of run up to moving into Broadhurst Park in 2015, when obviously it was, you know, it was all about the, you know, getting our own ground, wasn't it? But also I think we were, you know, it felt like at the time we did a lot of preaching about like the, you know, how great supporter ownership was, and you know, and how it was almost like we were going to change the world, wasn't it, at the time? And then we went through that, you know, the sort of dark days, didn't we, of 2015, 2016, where, you know, it almost felt like you know, the club might not survive that turmoil. So there was, you know, there was stuff that was written about that, and then the stuff really from the period since then, which has all been about, really, hasn't it, the sort of recovery of the club, and sort of gaining some sort of financial and you know, and playing, you know, sustainability really, and trying to set us up for the future. And you know, the board have done some incredible work on that. So yeah, so I mean, you know, I'll come on to the book in a minute. I just wanted to say that it's probably worth pointing out that even before this book came along, I was kind of very much in book writing mode, because I've been working for the last sort of couple of years on, I've been trying to write a book about working in the NHS as a finance manager, but a book that's got, you know, I mean, that probably sounds really boring, but like a book that's got teeth to it, because, you know, there's lots of issues that I really want to kind of address. And I kind of I was kind of seeing it, I think, as a sort of back office equivalent of, I don't know if you're familiar with the likes, there's been a lot of books written about the NHS in the last few years. One by a comedian called Adam Kay, called This Is Going to Hurt, which tells of his experience as a junior doctor, which is a very good book, and it's very funny. And there's also, I think, a better book by a junior doctor called Rachel Clark, who, before she was a junior doctor, she was also a journalist. So it's written very well, and it's got a political edge to it as well. And that book is called Your Life in My Hands. And if anyone out there listening to this is interested in, you know, finding out quite how the NHS has ended up in the state that it's currently in, that book is actually well worth reading. So I was trying to write a book that was a sort of finance manager equivalent of that. And just as lockdown started, I'd written probably about 2/3 of the book, and just as lockdown started, I was beginning to send proposals out to literary agents and publishers to see if anybody actually might be interested in publishing this book. And as we entered March, I'd sort of getting my first few, like, you know, like thanks but no thanks emails back as I was sending those out. So, but now of course it's all just gone. You know, I mean, I think it's with now COVID's come along. I think, you know, like lots of different industries, I think the bottom's sort of fallen out of the publishing industry at the moment. You know, a lot of these agents that I was trying to contact have now, you know, have now been furloughed, and it's just, yeah, I've just not heard just not heard a thing now since, what is that? That's like 4 or 5 months ago now, isn't it? So yeah, but you know, at that time then that we entered in lockdown, you know, I was very much in book writing mode. So perhaps this is no surprise in a way that ended up doing this. So yeah. So in terms of the book itself, it's funny in a way, because I was you know, it sounds like that really sort of cliched kind of thing, doesn't it? You know, like, what did you do during the lockdown? You know, like, oh, I wrote a book, and I was on a call to one of my mates the other week. We were just having a bit of a catch up on like this on Zoom kind of thing, and we were just talking. You know, we're just catching up with what we've been doing during the lockdown and stuff. And I asked him, and he was saying, "Oh, you know, not really done that much. You know, and you know, I've not been one of those like lockdown wankers that's like written a book or you know, or learned a foreign language or whatever." And there was me, like, you know, I was just about to, you know, tell him all about the book that I've virtually been living and breathing for the last 3 months. And yeah, and he asked me, and I just said, no, I've not really been doing much either, mate. But we left about it, because I actually sent him. He's not interested in football, but I sent him a copy of the book, and he emailed me back to say, "Oh, you never told me about this." Yeah, so yeah, the cliche of writing a book during lockdown. But really, I haven't written a book during lockdown, because the stuff was already written anyway. So yeah, the idea for actually doing this book actually came from the first, I think it was the first online Course You Can Malcolm at the beginning of April, when John Darwin did his poetry set, which I really enjoyed, like the rest of the E. Malcolmses. And then he said something about, like, he had, you know, he'd got a new collection of poetry, and he basically said, you know, look, I'm putting this out there that, you know, if you want to buy one of these, I'll donate, you know, whatever you send to the club. And I sent off for a copy. I really enjoyed it. Sent off for a copy. A couple of days later, it turned up, and I remember reading through the book and thinking, you know, this isn't, you know, I donated, gave a tenner to the club, and I remember thinking, like, this is just fantastic idea, you know, just donating some, you know, just something that you've produced, something that you've written, that you're actually like donating the proceeds to the football club that you own at a time when, like, you know, we've got literally, you know, virtually no money at all coming in. And I think the word was at the time, wasn't it, that the word from the board was at the time that the lockdown was going to cost us at least £100,000 in, you know, a gap in our finances. I think from those last 6 home games that we never got to play. So £100,000, you know, I was thinking, like, well, that's a lot of poetry books that we've got to sell to get that £100,000. So I decided to sort of get off my ass and do something myself. I think it's to try and you know, make a contribution towards that gap in our finances. So that was where the idea for the book came from, really, because I thought, you know, well, I've been writing, you know, at this point I've been writing about FC United for 7 years. There's all that stuff sat there on my blog that a lot of the time doesn't, you know, doesn't get that much traffic. So some of those pieces on there have barely been read, to be honest. There's others that have, you know, that have got a decent audience, but there's a lot that have barely been read. So it's that point that I started, like, just looking through the blog, really, for pieces that I thought would be interesting and would work well in a book, in a collection of pieces. And I think when I started out, I think one of the books I kind of had in mind was the Stuart Lee, you know, the comedian. I think a few years ago he did a collection of pieces that he'd written, I think, for the Observer, his Observer column. I think over a number of years, he put them into a book called Content Provider. And the format of this book is very similar to Stuart Lee's Content Provider format, I think, in that it's got all his original Observer pieces in, but then what he does is he does an intro to each one to set it in context, because obviously some of the pieces were written several years ago. He's got the intro, and then what he does at the end is like usually a really funny ending where he puts you know, he looks at some of the responses, some of the comments that he got to these pieces, and he's always really funny about them, and usually, you know, typically self-deprecating about them. So it makes for quite a good read, and that's the kind of format that I think I had in mind, was because obviously you had to bear in mind that all these pieces were written, you know, as individual articles, and then trying to put them together into a single volume obviously presented a challenge of its own. So hence the need for, you know, the intros and the kind of bits that are put in at the end of each well, most of the pieces to try and set them into some sort of context. One of the other things I had to think about at the beginning as well was the size of the book. I mean, because to be honest with you, if we'd have published like everything on the blog, I think it would have, you know, well, it would have been twice the size. But I think it was when I started looking at printing, you know, the cost of printing a book, which was something that I knew nothing about, and so I started getting quotes in for printing a book, and I just thought, you know, I just started getting some quotes back, and you know, numbers that were running into 4 figures, and I just thought, well, you know, hang on a minute, just need to be careful of the size here, because don't want to run away and start printing a book that's, you know, that might not sell to begin with. I mean, you know, at that stage I was thinking, you know, my original thoughts were to print 100. So I was getting quotes for printing 100, but, you know, all the time thinking at the back of my mind that, you know, you can sell a few dozen, and then you can stick the rest in the shop, kind of thing. So yeah, so the size of the book and balancing that with the actual printing cost was one of my initial sort of battles, really, you know, like trying to balance the two. Obviously the typesetting and cover design. I mean, I owe a hell of a lot to Tony Howard, the former FCUM program editor, for doing that, because I think, I'm not sure how many hours Tony's worked on that, but I'm sure it's a hell of a lot in terms of, you know, doing all that typesetting for it all the 234 pages, and then he did all the design for the covers, which I think looked absolutely fantastic, you know, because it was, you know, one of the other things at the back of my mind is when we were producing the book, is like, you just want it to, you know, as well as the content, you actually want it to look the part, don't you? You want it to look professional, and you want it to look, you know, I wanted it to look something like, you know, if that comes through the post and you open the envelope, it looks something, you know, that's worth like spending a tenner on, you know, before you've even opened it, kind of thing. I think it does. I mean, the covers look fantastic, and Tony also persuaded me, I think, about the contrast, I think, between the sort of black and white photos on the front, and then that fantastic picture on the back of the match at Colwyn Bay in 2011. I think the contrast, I mean, I wasn't convinced at first, but I think actually in reality it does work ever so well. So thanks ever so much to Tony for that, because that was all his idea, and as was the title of the book, the red thread, which certainly beat my original like working title, my very poor choice of original working title for the book. But I think the red thread is a very appropriate title, I think, because it connects, I think, lots of different things. I mean, I think, you know, the pieces that are in this book, like, you know, a lot of them refer back to our Manchester United supporting days, and a lot of them like deal with issues that are nothing to do with football, you know, political issues as well. So there's the, you know, there's that connection with the politics, with, you know, our first love when it comes to football, and of course FC United now, and everything that's happened to it in the last 7 years. So there's I think there's a thread there between the different pieces. I think it's a very apt title, really. I think also I should say, as part of this launch, a big thank you as well to the photographers that have taken the pictures that are on the front and the back pages of the book. So Russ Hart and Matt Wilkinson for the pictures on the front, and also there's some of Tony Howard's pictures on there as well. And there's actually a couple of mine as well in there as well. And then the picture on the back, the Colwyn Bay picture, is actually by Richard Searle. Should say a big thank you to all of those. I mean, I think FC down the years has been blessed with some very talented photographers. Been very lucky in that case, I think, and I think this is typical of that. Yeah, so that was kind of the background to the book, really. And yeah, I think another of the things that I completely underestimated, I think, was the admin work that's been involved, you know, since we actually sent the book off to to be printed. Just actually collecting names and addresses and getting people to pay, and then getting people to spell my name right when they pay. The hours I've spent over the last sort of few weeks, chasing people for payment. And it turns out it's actually sat in there. I think in fact, I think on PayPal now, I think if you go on PayPal, I think as soon as you type Jonathan Allsopp in, I think it comes up with the 1p. I think people just click on that, and I think it just ends up sitting in some sort of pending room somewhere and not actually coming through to me. So yeah, that's been one of the slightly amusing aspects. But yeah, the whole process of the admin side of things has almost become a full-time job, I think, since we sent it to the printers in June. But we've now got, so we printed 450 in the first batch, and we've now, all of those have now gone out. All of those have been paid for and have gone out and are being read, and have gone out around the world as well. Just this morning I was informed that a copy had arrived in Auckland, New Zealand. I think we've got copies in Australia. I think one's arrived in the US now. Japan, of course, and various European countries as well. So so it's gone international, as well as the UK, which is nice to see. So all those 450 have sold out, and we've raised £6,152, I think, which is a fantastic effort, really, and I think reflects the generosity, I think, of FC United's support. I think, because, you know, I mean, the book was, we were asking for a tenner, but I think most, you know, a hell of a lot of people have paid substantially more than a tenner for it. In fact, so I think the most has been paid for it is actually £50 for a copy, which just seems incredible, really, that anybody would pay £50 for that book. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I think the average price in the end was probably somewhere between £13 and £14 in terms of what people have actually paid for a single copy. So yeah, so that's fantastic, really, and we've now paid that money to the club. But there's, I think what the book's actually going out there has done has generated a bit of interest. You know, I've had some lovely comments back via email, via Twitter, via text, via all sorts of ways and means. Some really lovely feedback and people recommending the book to other people, and it's kind of gained a little bit of momentum, I think, as people have begun to read it and recommend it. So we're now, we've printed a second batch, and I had that delivered yesterday. So we're now ready to go on another 150 copies, and be doing a run to the post office tomorrow to send a few more off. So I think we're close now. Actually, we're very close to actually our 500th. For selling our 500th copy of the book, and then from this batch, any that are left over will hopefully be able to go into the club shop for when we actually do get around to going back into football grounds again. So there'll be, because I think, and I know it's really just a small thing, and it's been great doing this and doing all the mail order stuff, but there's a bit of me that just would really like to see the book on a shelf somewhere, which I haven't really had a chance to do yet, because we've just been getting them in and stuffing them in envelopes and sending them out. So it's just a small thing, really. Just like to see just a few copies on a shelf in the shop. That'd be quite nice. So yeah, I think I've gone well over my.
I think Graham was just showing you his copy on his shelf there, I think, while you were talking. So,
yeah, I'd seen a picture of it,
yeah, thanks, Jonathan. That was really good. One of the things that I think the main thing that comes across from me was it's very honest. And I think there's a temptation when you're looking back over writings from 7 years, as you say, some of the pieces, in your words, come across as near evangelism. And it's interesting because it reflects how we all were at the time. And I like the way that you've been honest enough to leave that in, even though you think now when you look back at it, you may cringe. And, the phrase doing things differently, you say it's become a meaningless phrase akin to get Brexit done or, strong and stable or anything like that. But you left it in. So it's a kind of warts and all. And if you had taken out those bits, it wouldn't have been the honest book that it's turned out.
Yeah, it was somebody else has kind of pointed that out to me as well recently, that they saw that as one of the best aspects of it really. And I must admit, I wanted everything to be in there, warts and all. I didn't want to start playing around with pieces that have been written in the past. So hence the need for the context. But you're right. I mean, when I was looking back at them, some of them genuinely did make me cringe, and that was one of them. The doing things differently stuff, and just the title of that particular post. I mean, it's that article. It's the first one in the book. We could settle wars with this. Well, oh goodness me, yeah.
We were taking our lead from the top, weren't we? There were gentlemen who thought we were going to change the world rather than, as you said, a decent non-league football club. So I think it was good to get things in perspective, and
that's where we were at the time. But I think the one that I struggle with now as well is the one that was written about the Chesterfield cup match, and everything that went on around that, and it's as I wrote at the end, there was all the protest, but in many ways we didn't realise at the time that the financial situation that the club was in, did we? And the fact that the £67,000 that we got from that match being televised actually went a long way to
Yeah,
in
absolutely. It
this
feels a
club
bit
and going.
where we all stood outside for that first half now, and I mean, I was one of them as well. Looking back on it, now I sort of joke if we had an FA Cup tie, we'd be begging them to put us on TV rather than demonstrating against it now, wouldn't we? That's how far things have come. So, but we've all kind of been down that same journey, so it's good to remember the mistakes you made along the way as well, isn't it? But I know just one other thing though, that came out of it. One of the lines near the beginning I liked was he said about membership is more than a laminated card. With it comes responsibility and democratic power too.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've seen, isn't it? In the last since 2016, I think
about the fans gaining more control, accepting more responsibility, rather than just letting people run it and say.
Yeah. It feels to me, up until 2015, we were quite content. I mean, and I was the same. We were quite content to sit back and let others get on with it, weren't we? To an extent. But I think since then it feels like to me it feels like a united effort now. The club, so many like individuals. I mean, the food hub at the ground this summer is just another classic example of that, isn't it? Of that you've got staff and volunteers there just pulling together to do something like that, and it epitomises the club at the moment. I think that so many people are participating in its actual running, which wasn't the case before, I don't think.
And you also wanted to appeal to fans of other clubs, didn't you? Other fan-owned clubs, like you mentioned Fisher and Clapton were two of the ones that you went to visit as well. Look, I think you have had quite a good response, haven't you, from fans of other clubs?
Yeah, we've had a decent response so far. So actually, I've got 6 of this new batch are going to Clapton. There's a Clapton fan got in touch with me and said, "Can you send us 6 copies?" There's a few fans down there that are interested in it. And there's a few other clubs as well. There was a Hereford fan that got in touch with me as well. But then there's a few bigger clubs as well, like Sheffield Wednesday, Nottingham Forest, Leeds as well. Believe it or not, there's quite a few other clubs there. I hope it's difficult with sometimes with the minutiae of stuff that's gone on and that's referred to in there to make it relevant. But the feedback that I've had so far is that people have found it. People who follow other clubs have found it interesting. So I always had that at the back of my mind that I did want it to appeal to fans of other clubs as well, and also to United fans as well, because I got in touch with Andy Mitten at United We Stand last week, and he's actually very kindly given us a page in the United We Stand summer special, which is coming out in a couple of weeks, for an extract from the book. So I've given him an 800-word extract, and hopefully he's going to put that in, because I think it's got an appeal to United fans as.
Yeah, definitely. I
well.
can relate to a lot of it, from what you've put in there. So, anybody else want to throw it out? If anybody puts the hand up or whatever, we can either unmute you or you unmute yourself. Maybe Andy Davis coming in first.
Jonathan,
Liam next. Yeah.
Yeah, Jonathan, you said that the blog is a mix of pieces about FC United and football on the one hand, and then it's an accountant's eye view of the NHS on the other, and that's like quite an unusual combination, really. And I just wonder, when you're writing the pieces, do you write them in the same way, in the same style, in the same voice, or are the NHS pieces very different from the football ones?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think when I started the blog in 2012, I think they were written with a very similar voice and a bit shouty and possibly even a bit like preachy about certain things. But I think now I think what in the time that I've been blogging, I'd like to think that my writing has developed a bit, and I think now the two are very different. I think the pieces that I'm writing about the NHS now are much more kind of toned down. I don't know whether that's the right word, but they're much more now evidential. So I'm referring to statistics and numbers and different situations and things that have actually happened, and and pulling in references to pieces of other people have written, because I think it really needs that. You can't. Whereas I think a lot of the early pieces were about the NHS has been privatised and we need to do something about it. It's almost like man the barricades kind of thing, but there wasn't really a lot of like substance to it. Whereas now I think there is. Here's the now if I was writing that sort of piece, you'd say, well, here's the evidence that it is actually being privatised. This is what's happened, in the last decade. Here it all is, and go and read that, and so I think yeah. Whereas the FC pieces, I think again started off kind of we're going to save the world kind of thing, which was where a lot of us were, I think, in 2012, wasn't it? To now being, I think kind of more thoughtful pieces probably that also weigh up the other side of things, because I think the club over the last 4 years we've had to accept that there's compromises that we have to make and have to live with. I mean, for instance, there's a piece that in the book that I wrote about the sponsorship deal for the Northern Premier League last year with Bet Victor with the sponsors, weren't they? I mean, they've subsequently disappeared now, haven't they? Now the going's got tough, but they were the sponsors of the league last year, and of course all the sort of ethical issues that throws up for us as a football club. And I think at the time, a lot of people took to the forums to say, well, we can't complain at this because we've been involved with betting. We've got the names of betting firms even on our own website, and we do deals with like Holland's Pies and obesity is probably a bigger problem than gambling and that kind of thing, but at the same time, we accept that. But at the same time, Bet Victor is one of these like big sort of like, well, it's huge business, isn't it? That's run from an offshore tax haven and is denying us those tax revenues that could ultimately be used for the NHS, for education, for all sorts of things. So I think the pieces in a way have become acknowledging where we are, but just trying to weigh up things a bit more. Whereas if I'd written that piece probably in 2012, it would have been, it's terrible that like Bet Victor have come in and there's like no way they should be sponsoring the league. So I think I think the writing has grown up a little bit. I think in the 8 years.
Well, Liam Doyle, if you want to unmute yourself, I think you put your hand up.
Yeah, hello everyone.
Hi.
You probably don't know. I'm quite a new FC United fan. Obviously, my lad Chris plays for FC.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm new this year, and will be there next year as well. More of a statement, the question. I got the book more so for charity first, donate some money. Read it, absolutely amazed at it. I'm a Scouser, as you know. I did find it quite good. I'm also a left-wing socialist, so I like the political side of it. It was brilliantly read and a good read. I read it over 2 days. Couldn't put it down. I just like the way your clubs run. Yeah. obviously I'm Liverpoolian, but don't really follow Liverpool much. I used to follow Marine. I'm close to Marine, and luckily Chris played for Marine last year. I'd say, on record saying, I'd say you're probably the most professional non-league club I've ever seen, ever. The ground is brilliant. The way it's run is brilliant. Obviously, hopefully the football is now good under Renault and will be next year. I wasn't part of the club when you were going through the bad bits, so I don't really know and understand that. But all I can say is, hopefully do well next year. Hopefully get back in the conference in Northern Premier League North, Conference of North, which you should have been this year. And it'd be nice for Chris to be part of that and win something with you. All I've got to say.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Liam. Sorry.
You want to say anything on top of that, Jonathan?
No, I do recognise.
Obviously
it's given me some feedback on Twitter. Yeah. I think the thing about Liverpool is Liam still there, because there is in fact quite an interest. Well, and we'll be playing them in a few weeks' time. But FC City of Liverpool are a club that's been set up in a similar way to FC United, and he's doing a hell of a lot of good work in Liverpool.
Marine's also one of those non-league clubs that, I don't know about you, I'd certainly heard of when we were following top flight football. Marine clubs like them and Altrincham are kind of almost like legendary non-league clubs, and things. And I think a lot of them we were looking forward to playing. I remember being really giddy when we got to the same level as like Bradford Park Avenue, and I thought, played them in 1948. It's his big style, So we've been over to Marine a few times and enjoyed the trips over there. Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. And Chris had a good season as well. So fingers crossed for next season. Anybody else want to ask a question? Scarf? If you want to unmute yourself. I think you have to do it yourself, yeah. That's it.
Hi all. First of all, hi Trevor in Tokyo. He's on the other page. An observation first, Jonathan. I was reading about the Harrogate game. You mentioned about how posh the toilets were there. You said unlike Stadium Bridge. That just took me straight back to the Stadium Bridge toilets, exactly as you described them, which is wonderful. And I need a bit of advice. What I've been doing, I've been cherry picking, looking at the chat. Oh, I'll read that one now, or I'll read that one now. Should I read them in order? Does it make a difference, you think? Or anyone else that's read it? Or just open a book and just read that particular chapter? What do you think?
I think it's probably better read in the order it's written. But at the end of the day, they are all they're all individual articles, so you can ultimately dip in whatever you want. But I think it's quite interesting to, if you read it in order, then I think you do get a flavour for like what's happened to the club over the last 7 years and how it's kind of grown up. I think over the last 7 years.
Yeah, I think from the way I read it was chronological, and it does sort of flow a little bit better and it takes you through things in an order as they happen. Trevor, I think you want to ask a question.
Hi, thanks Scott. Congratulations, Mr. Allsopp, for an excellent book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Came to Tokyo, no problem. Thank you very much. So great work. Thanks, Jonathan.
No worries.
I'd like to ask you. You mentioned in the book that FC, of course, has no shirt sponsorship, but you put in the 2 words "for now." So I'd be interested to know if you think that in the future, I don't want to put you on the spot because I know people feel very strongly about shirt sponsorship, but and you mentioned a little bit about sponsorship in your introductory chat. So I wondered what you felt about how that relationship that we have with sponsorship might develop in the future. Do you see it changing in any particular way, or do you think it's always going to be a relationship that's a little bit fraught and a little bit difficult for the club? How do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Because, like, I mean, if you'd have asked me, at the time when this, the beginning of this book back in 2012, I mean, I would have said no way to shirt sponsorship. It was kind of like one of those red lines that you wouldn't cross, and like, if it happened, you'd probably end up walking away from the club or something, something suitably dramatic. But I think ultimately it's for us to decide, isn't it? It's for us to decide as the supporters that own the club, like what happens to the shirt, and if there are sufficient numbers of us that that want that want to sponsor on the front of the shirt, that want that revenue in order to enable the club to survive and have a successful future, then that's entirely up to us. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what I would want, but that's the reason why I put for now, because ultimately I think it is something that will always be there, an issue that will always be there in the background. And so whenever we talk about financial sustainability, and I think particularly at this time as well, after everything that's gone on in the last few months, that is just, I mean, before COVID came along, we were in a reasonable financial situation for the 2019-20 year, but after a lot of hard work that's gone into like the last 2, 3, 4 years to turn the club's finances around, we're actually, we're in a position where it was looking like we were going to make a healthy operating profit this year. But obviously that's all gone out of the window now. And, and even now we don't really know whether, we might be back playing in September, but we don't know what's going to happen after September. Whether there's like a second wave of the virus comes along and we end up, with like half a season and, and half of the revenue. And so it almost feels in a way like when it comes to finance, it feels like we're back at square one in terms of, the whole question of becoming a financially sustainable club. And I think, well, whilst ever you've got that discussion ongoing about like how we remain financially sustainable, I think you've got to be prepared to like at least like discuss the issue of a shirt sponsor. You can't just like say, there's no way we can even contemplate that. So that's why I'd phrased it as it is. But 8 years ago, I would have just said, that's a red line. I'm not, no way am I going there. And, I'd rather like leave the club than see a sponsor on the shirt. So times change.
Just a thought, if anybody is too shy to ask a question, or those who haven't got the video turned on because we can't see you, if you want to type one in on chat, we can ask it for you just in case. So I can't see anybody else at the moment who, Roger, if you want to unmute. Do I need to do it for you? Yeah. Roger?
Hey, Jonathan.
Hi, you're not coming through very clearly. If you can maybe come a bit closer to your mic.
How's that?
Very quiet.
Hey, you hear me now?
Yeah,
It's very, very quiet. We can barely make you out. I'm sorry.
I don't know how to do this.
We can just about hear you. If you want to say it, I'll try and repeat it if Jonathan can't hear it.
Well, I want to wish him all the best, and I'm still waiting on my signed copy.
Oh, right.
He heard that all right.
I think he knows who I am.
You know.
Yeah, it's on the way.
Okay, thank you.
So,
I could really hear you. He was just pretending he couldn't because he knew what you were going to say.
How are you? How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm okay. It's hot here.
Yeah, yeah, it's warming up here too.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize it was. We have a coach for a Gaelic football team here in New York, and we have this similar kind of problem with sponsorship and funding. There's lots of sports here in New York, but there's nothing for. It's not a mainstream sport here, you know.
Yeah,
Everything is fundraising.
Bit how we've become these days. Not
We're constantly trying to raise money to keep a club on the go.
That's where we're at the moment, and hence Jonathan writing the book, isn't it?
Okay.
Raising money.
It's constant. We're always, and some people get fed up with, you're always asking for money.
yeah,
It seems,
yeah.
it seems to be never ending, you know what I mean? So sometimes people, they tend to back off then.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, that there has been a lot of that at FC. I think down the years, hasn't there, of you know, almost that sort of like fatigue at constantly being asked to contribute. But I think but at the same time, it is, you know, I think the thing for us as a supporter-owned club is it ultimately is our club, and it's, you know, it's as good as us as a collective, isn't it? And, you know, we've all got that contribution to make, even though at times we might be, you know, fed up of, like, you know, chucking another few quid into the pot kind of thing. It's you know, it's our thing, it's our club, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's what
it relies on us.
Yeah.
I've got another question, Mike, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, Mike. Go ahead.
This is kind of like a follow-up to Trevor's question in that, and also to Jonathan talking about him being the scribe for the board meetings these days. Whether he feels, and he's kind of, it's because he's mellowed over the last sort of 3 or 4 years. Does he feel that's due to being closer to the centre of things and kind of having a wider understanding based on being in those board meetings?
Yeah,
Good question.
yeah, that is. Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I feel now that I know a lot more about the running of the football club than whatever I did in the past. But I don't necessarily think that comes from being the board reporter as such. I just think that comes from the greater openness and transparency and the way that the club's being run now, where, you know, if ever there are issues where, you know, they need the help of supporters, they will come. You know, the board will come to, the board of management team will come to us and ask us for help. Whereas I think in the past there was things that have gone on, things that have happened that we just haven't, you know, it's like I was talking about the Chesterfield match, isn't it? Felt like at the time, like, I don't think many of us knew the state of the club's finances at that particular time, you know, and there we are, like, outside the ground protesting about the match being on telly, and yet the money that we got from that match being screened ultimately, you know, bailed us out, really, that in that first season in our own ground. So it's a good question, but I think the mellowness has come from knowing more, I think, about how the club operates, and just, I think us growing up as a football club and being aware that, you know, sometimes we do have to compromise a little bit. We can't just, you know, we can't just be the idealists and the, you know, the protesters and the rebels, like, for forever kind of thing. Sometimes we do just have to accept that, you know, for us to you know, to maintain sustainability in the long run, there are things that we have we have to compromise a little bit on. But yeah, no, thanks for that question. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, the thing about is, you know, and JP and the Big Bang and all that stuff in the middle, we all had to grow up a bit.
Yeah,
That's football fans, you know, we're obviously adults anyway, but
yeah,
I can understand your journey.
That's
Yeah.
what I was saying before. You know, I think when you read it in chronological order as well, it helps you remind that, and you think, oh yeah, I felt exactly the same way at the time, and we all went through a lot of the similar feelings, and you can certainly relate to all of that. Anybody else? I see, is that Tim Burrell there, who was part of the board?
Yeah, so
Would you like to comment on anything?
No, it's a great read. I'm terrible at reading books. I've probably read about 2 in my life, and this is one of them. But no, I love it, and I'm probably not very good at reading books because my attention span is not very good. But I love it because each one, you know, it's bite-sized for me, but each one of them brings back memories, and it's brilliantly written, and Jonathan has just got a skill which, he's a wordsmith, isn't he? And the turn of phrase, and sometimes you go back and you read a paragraph again because it gives you pleasure because it's just the words he's used, and I think that it's a gift that you've got. You're probably shit at football, actually, Jonathan. Well, in fact, we have played, so I know we've both got that skill. But no, it's a brilliant book, and I'm so pleased that you've actually got it. And you know, there's one thing you can say you're going to do something, but it's when you actually do it that matters. You know, and you've actually gone out and you've bloody well done it, and you've raised thousands for the club here, and you've actually put something in the memory bank forever about what it was about, and thank you from my point of view. I think it's absolutely brilliant. So well done for doing it, and but it's also a great read, and I'm savouring every time I go into it. You know, I sort of save each one, and I'm slowly getting through it, about halfway through it now. But no, it's brilliant. And also for me, by the way, I love that picture of Colin Bell on the back because that's very close to where I started trying. And I know Stuart, you probably started playing footy up there, didn't you, mate? So, a lot. So, you know, well done from everyone, and also for raising that money. It's absolutely brilliant. And you've got another print run coming.
Yeah, we've got another delivered yesterday. Another 150 to go out. So I don't know. It's difficult to know where it'll end at the moment. I mean, I think it's. You know, there might be, you know, it might gain a little bit of momentum again, and take it as it comes at the moment. And like I say, you know, I'd like to have a few in the club shop as well for when we get back to.
That'd be a great idea, yeah.
Get back to the ground, but, yeah.
Stuff,
yeah. No, thanks, Tim.
That's brilliant.
Cheers.
Yeah, and I think the openness and transparency that you talk about, Jonathan, started with Tim and Sam when they came on board. So it's worth acknowledging that and thanking you for your contribution that you did at an incredibly important time, Tim.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know or aren't aware. Anybody else want to say anything? Andy Davis?
Jonathan,
I've got somebody else next, but you go first, Andy. I'll figure out how to pronounce his name while he's done it. It's one person I don't want asking. It's that name. Caolan. If anybody knows how to pronounce it, tell me. But anyway, Andy.
No, Jonathan.
Kayla.
Right, Kayla. Right. Go on, Andy. Sorry.
Yeah, Jonathan, you said that you had an alternative title for the book, but you didn't tell us what it was. You just said terrible. So everyone wants to know, what was it?
Oh yeah, because when I started it, I just had this thing about, like, I wanted to. The title of the book had to be the title of one of the chapters. I just had this thing about about that. So I'd gone through I'd got the 38 chapters together, and then we were just running through them. And eventually I picked it's actually the article from 2016 when it was all kicking off, and the infamous like Dave Boyle, the request for him to come in and snoop on us all on the internet, and then of course famously he said that he'd had a look, hadn't he, already on our he'd already had a look on our forum and felt like he needed a bath afterwards, and I wrote that. I wrote the piece that followed that, and I called it "Tales from the Bathtub." Yeah. So, and that's what but then it was interesting because then that piece got. I mean, it was on my blog, and then it went onto the Fine Lung website almost immediately, but was relabeled at the time as Bath Time FC United, which is what I've ended up calling it in the book, because I was reminded of all the Pete Boyle
songs from the
tapes and CDs and stuff, which were called Songs from the Bathtub, weren't they? So so thankfully it wasn't a very good title, was it? And the red thread is much better, much better. But yeah, and it's going back to that Tales from the Bathtub or Bath Time at FC United piece. It's quite an interesting one, that, because of all the pieces in the book, that's probably the one that took me the least time to write. It's basically a rant. It's like a 2,000 word rant about like the state that the club was in at the time, and I wrote it in one evening. Whereas like almost every other piece in that book is, I mean, I fuss around when I'm writing for ages. I'll write something down and then I'll put it on the blog, and then I'll leave it for often several days, and then come back to it and tinker around with it and play around. Sometimes it can be like a couple of weeks before I'll actually publish a piece from when I've originally written it. But that piece, that Bath Time piece, was actually written in an evening. It was the evening that the board had decided to say that there was a code of conduct coming out, but they'd done it on the evening. I think if I remember rightly, it was the evening when United were playing Liverpool in the Europa League second leg, I think, and they released this statement at about 6:30 in the evening, knowing full well that like most FC United fans were probably like going to watch the United Liverpool match that evening. And I just remember, I was due to go out that evening to the pub to watch the match, but I felt so angry when that announcement came out that I just forget the match. I'm just gonna write this down, and I basically wrote that article in the evening and then just published it straight away. But you can tell, because it's just almost like a stream of consciousness kind of rant about like the mess that the club was in. But of course, it was the one that subsequently Daniel Taylor, who it turned out was a regular reader of a bit of a fan of a Fine Lung. It turned out it was the piece that he spotted, and I think it woke him up to the what was going on at the club.
And tried to get David Conn to persuade him to not write it was the interesting bit that you put in.
Yeah.
That's how bad things had got, anyway.
Yeah. And of course, ever since, David Conn was always the cheerleader. Was the big cheerleader for FC, wasn't he? And he actually, there's one of the earlier pieces, which is the piece around when we moved into Broadhurst Park, in May 2015, that he actually shared that piece on his Twitter. So that got quite a bit of readership from David Conn sharing it. But yeah, less than a year later, it's it's almost like we don't exist in his eyes anymore. I mean, he's writing stuff about the new AFC Bury, isn't he? And it's almost like they're going to be the first supporter-owned football club to ever play in Bury, aren't they? It's incredible. We've literally been written out of the David Conn history books, I think.
Right, we better bring in Caelan. He's waited long enough. Thanks for waiting. Just unmute yourself. Yep.
Cheers. Yeah, Jonathan, I just finished the book this evening, and like everyone, think it's really great. One of the things about it is, I think, like most good football writing, it's not really about what happens on the pitch. It's using football really as a lens to talk about other things. Sort of the politics of the club or sort of society on a wider sense. I was just thinking, were there any sort of like writers or books that you kind of picked that up from? How do you sort of get like who, what other football writers or like books do you come back to, or do you sort of look up and look to for inspiration whenever you're kind of writing it? What sort of made you want to start writing about football?
Well, I think in terms of writing about football, I think the fanzines for me, when the fanzines started in, like the United one started in 80. I think Red News started in 88, didn't it? But then 89 was United We Stand and Red Issue. When they came out, it was that kind of like triggered something, I think, because just reading that, when you. Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of, it's different now, isn't it? Because we're all kind of used to that way of writing about football, and people discuss things on forums and stuff. But at the time, like the only sort of things we had around football, like publications like that, you had the club program, and you had like various like magazines like Match and Shoot and various other publications, but there was nothing at the time that was really written from a fan's point of view. So the fanzines for me, and reading, I mean, United We Stand was always my personal favourite, and reading the likes of Rob Brady and Two Motors and Mike Duff and a few of the other writers in there, I think was that got me to just think about going to football in different ways and actually writing it down on paper, and and I started. I mean, I was an occasional contributor to United We Stand, particularly in the early 90s, and that was what started me off, I think, on writing about football. I mean, more generally, in terms of writing and reporting on things. I mean, I love it's not in terms of books, but I mean, I love like Private Eye as a publication, and the way that the people in that actually write about topics, where they expose, Private Eye is very good at exposing like hypocrisy, isn't it, and double standards, and but using like evidence and statistics to actually do that, and I really like that kind of like investigative journalism, as it were, and I think. Yeah, I think some of the more later pieces are moving more towards that way of writing than the earlier pieces in the book, which are a bit more like, a bit more, like I said earlier, a bit more ranty, a bit more preachy about like saving the world, etc. But yeah, I hope that's answered your question.
Okay. Can't see anybody else. Does anybody else want who's not asked the question? Scarf, do you want to come back in? Yeah, go on.
It's just a very, very quick one. A personal note, Jonathan. You said you went to the games with the East Anglian branch. Was that the early 90s?
Yeah.
With Andy Dobney. Yeah, I was on that coach for about 3 years.
Yeah, I was on that night from 90 to 94. I was.
Yeah, I lived in Stamford. Used to pick up in Stamford on the way to the game, didn't we?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
sometimes they had like 3 coaches going, didn't they? But yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
was always got on at Cambridge, and probably, yeah.
Small world. Anyway, I've got to say adios, everybody. It's great. So enjoy the rest of your call. See you all
Cheers.
September the 19th, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Right, how do I get out of this?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, Mike's just saying on the chat there, if you've not read it, Rob Brady's book, An Undividable Glow, is fantastic. Kaylin, if you've not read it. I think most of us on here know that, and it was one of your inspirations, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, unless there's anybody else wants to, I think Graham said something about what's his next book going to be called, Red Thread, the autobiography. So, I mean, have you got any thoughts, early days, but has this put you off or encouraged you to do another one? Not necessarily on FC, maybe, you know, your the NHS book or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's certainly encouraged me, to be honest, because I've really enjoyed it. I mean, it's been hard work. I mean, I feel like I've been living and breathing it for the last 3 months, you know, 3
like
and a bit
giving
months.
birth or something.
Yeah.
if men can get close to it.
But no, it certainly hasn't put me off doing it again. But yeah, I mean, I'd still like to try and get the NHS one out there, which obviously requires a different route, doesn't it? You know, it's not the sort of book that you could self-publish. It does need the backing of a publisher, and it needs an agent to sell it. But yeah, I'm certainly going to be getting back into that. But I think, yeah, I suspect there might be another FC one to follow, because I feel like actually the issue that I was talking about earlier on of having to balance the cost versus the actual number of articles that I was putting in, I feel like there's quite a few pieces in there that I would have liked to have got in ideally, but it was just the cost that I was thinking about as well. So yeah, there's certainly room for another one, I think.
Tales from the Boardroom. How about
that? Tales from the Boardroom. But I think after the Red Thread, I think the NHS one has got to be the Red Tape, hasn't it? I think. So yeah, it's given me a title, if nothing else.
Yeah. Okay. Unless anybody else wants to ask anything, we might as well wrap it up. Nobody else? Oh, Stuart just waving at you rather than saying you want to ask a question. Never known you so quiet, Stuart. I'm trying to tempt him into saying something, but he's not having it. Yeah. Oh, there we go. He couldn't resist.
Is it all soup or all soup? All sop or all soup?
Well, it's all soup now, isn't it?
Yeah, an in-house joke, like, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely all soup. Yeah, you see, it even says it on the right hand side.
Yeah, Stu's the one who nicknamed him Soupy. Right.
Yeah,
okay. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for attending the Red Thread book launch, Jonathan's first book launch. I guess we're all. But most of all, thanks to you, Jonathan, for all your efforts in this, the money you've raised, all the hard work. I think it's exceptional what you've done, especially during this time when the club is absolutely desperate for the money. Selena said this was great, and I'm not even a football fan. Great book too. So yeah, really heartfelt thanks from all of us, I would say, Jonathan.
Cheers, and
good luck with the next 150. And those of you who've got it, spread the word. Let people know that you can still get it. If friends of yours haven't read it, buy it as a present for them or whatever. Early Christmas presents, birthday presents. So yeah, good luck.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for tuning in, and everyone for buying it as well. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Okay. Great. I don't know whether Andy, Lynette, Jonathan, do you want to stay on just while we just